Welcome to TBN Chat's number 3. It's me, Peter Nixon, at Peter Nixon Esquire, for the Talking Nonsense About Impact Wrestling channel. I am here with actor, director, editor, producer, musician, DJ. Have I missed anything out, Ren?
Nice human being.
All-around fantastic human being, Mr. Len Davies. How are you, sir?
I'm great, thank you, Sam. Peter, I appreciate you getting me on here. That's it's been a while since I've had a chance to talk wrestling, so there's a lot of stuff which can come out. So
fantastic. Well, you can call me Sam, Peter, whatever you like, sir.
Cool.
So shall we jump into your upbringing? So you grew up in the UK, correct?
Born and bred in Cardiff in Wales. I'm a proud Welshman.
Ah, okay. And you moved to Germany, from what I understand.
Yeah, and basically the story sort of dwelled a little bit beyond that, because I didn't go to Germany until I was, what was it, in my 33, 34. But basically what happened was I was working with the band Alien Sex Fiend as a sound engineer. And when we did a tour of Germany, I found this one place in Munster, which was really, really cool. And a young lady at the same time who enticed me back over to Munster for a week, which turned out to be 5 years. Because basically I ended up being a chief engineer in a recording studio there, a DJ in a nightclub that we played with Alien Sex Fiend, all sorts of stuff. So yeah, Germany, that was 1989 when I moved over there. So
fantastic. And you did music work over there. You also moved over to Latvia as well?
That was an interesting one, because as chief engineer of the studio, I ended up doing the first surround sound movie for Latvia. And I produced their top rock band called Linga. And in sort of April '94, they released the album over in Latvia. And they invited me over, and they'd only been free from Soviet influence for like 3 years. 91, they became independent. And I noticed while I was there that they still had a lot of Soviet old technology. So one thing led to another, and I ended up moving over to Latvia, representing companies like Soundscape Hard Disk Company and Ampex Tape and Steinberg Cubase and all these other bits and pieces. Business-wise, it didn't work in Latvia because there wasn't that much money around. But no, it was. I lived there for 2 years, and I got my wonderful son Tom from the experience, and my second wife Agnesa actually from Latvia as well. So yeah, it was a good thing. And in '96, I came back to London.
Fantastic. How is Tom doing? I haven't spoken to him in a long time.
Tom is doing amazingly well at the moment. He's technical. I'm not saying technical director, but he's pretty much got the control of that whole situation when it comes to a studio called LA Castle Studios here in Burbank. And it's one of these green screen, totally virtual studios. And he's just, I don't know, he's their right-hand guy pretty much. So I'm really pleased about that. He's got his own apartment in Burbank now, so it's all settling down for him beautifully.
We should point out that you're coming to us from LA right now. So you moved over there and you've been doing acting work, and you've got a lot of other projects going at the moment. I know Emergency LA is probably your top project at the moment.
Yeah, it's one of those things that it's taken a while, but I mean, it always does. Raising the funding is always hard. And naturally, the last couple of years have been hard with the pandemic and everything else that's been going on. But there's not a lot I can say at the moment, but there's a few things in the pipeline which will get the show made. It is going to get made. And I know that there are some shows that have taken 10 years or more before they've actually raised the money to be filmed. But we do have, apart, Kurt Angle obviously is still in the lead, bless him. He's still playing Sergeant Gabe Mandel of LAPD. Yeah. And we've just had the pleasure of being joined by an A-list actress who's going to play our LAPD captain, but I can't give the name out until the funding's in place. But
right. We look forward to hearing.
It's all coming together.
Yeah, excellent. Glad to hear it. So, obviously, you were heavily involved in music from a young age, big into your music. When did you discover wrestling? Have you always been a fan?
I've always been a fan of wrestling, and it's like the first, this is a fun story, this little bit, because the first time I really wanted to pay attention as to how wrestling worked to influence people, I was about 6, I think 5 or 6, and my parents, they would always go to Hastings for a holiday, or you know, or Torquay or something like that. But I remember we were at Hastings, and they went to see a wrestling match, and the Royal Brothers were the tag team, right? I can't remember who they were against, but of course the Royal Brothers were the good guys. You know, they were the blue eyes,
Yeah.
and they had a bit of cheating going on in the corners. And I remember my mother standing on her chair, screaming at the top of her voice, "Leave him alone, you bastard," and all this sort of stuff. Right? And I've sort of, "Mum, what are you doing?" You know, it's like, but from that age on, that sort of fascinated me, how something like that could engender that sort of reaction from my mum, who never would do that normally, right?
Yeah.
And
So,
one thing led to another, so I just kept on following it.
excellent. Did you twig then and there that wrestling was entertainment as opposed to a legit contest?
I mean, at that age, I was still learning it pretty much. The time that I learned the entertainment was when I would follow what Big Daddy was doing quite regularly. It was pretty obvious the way they worked it with Big Daddy side of things, in the fact that you know, his tag team opponent would get all sorts of crap knocked out of him, and all of a sudden Daddy's in and does everything he does for about a minute, and then it's all over. You know, so it's like, and it was one of those things. I started to get the grips with that. I learned more about the entertainment side of it in '91 when I was in Germany, and for the first time I actually saw WWF at the time. I wasn't aware of them before then, and the first one was Undertaker.
Right.
Undertaker coming out with the whole, you know, the urn thing, and Paul Bearer, and the body bags at the end, and all this, and I thought, that's just brilliant. That was just absolutely amazing. So I became totally hooked on that. And then in '93, WrestleMania the album came out, and that was huge in Germany, absolutely huge. And a lot of people don't know it, but the producer of that album was Simon Cowell.
Yeah.
Some people don't actually know that, but it's like all the things that were coming in there, and the songs, the way they put it together. You know, the Man in Black for the Undertaker, and then you had Shawn Michaels doing a poem because he couldn't sing to save his life. It was all sorts of stuff. But I loved that album. I absolutely loved it, and that took it to the next level. And of course, that centered the entertainment factor for me straight away. And I don't know, from there on in, I was watching more and more of WWF as much as I could, because of course British wrestling had gone, and in Germany you had this show called Catch Up, which was because it was quite big over there as well, so I would watch that whenever I could. But the entertainment factor was the thing which attracted me to it. And I know for a fact, I didn't know any wrestlers at that time, not personally, but I can imagine exactly all the training and everything that they would go through to be as physically active as they were in a ring for however long the matches go on, because it's just intense cardio if you're doing it correctly, you know.
100%. What was your introduction into the wrestling business itself?
Well, in 2005, SmackDown came to the Excel Center, and I went there to see the show. And for a little while before that, I'd suddenly been thinking about other wrestling companies on the end, because I was following Jim Johnson a lot. I don't think people who don't know Jim Johnson, he's the guy that wrote most, if not all, of the WWF and WWE themes, the entrance themes. And so I was following a lot of stuff that he was doing. And I was buying WWE, the album, and all the you know, with the various themes on it. And being a musician myself, I was just loving the idea of possibly getting into doing some wrestling entrance themes. So after that SmackDown at the Excel Center, when I realized it wasn't a full-blown show, it was a house show. The entrance was, you know, when the Undertaker came in, it was almost disappointing. There was no lightning, you know, it was literally very, very down key. So, but the music still had the same effect. So after that, I just started reaching out to a couple of British wrestling companies, and I thought, yeah, I'd like to do some music. Why not? Let's see what happens. And the one company that I connected with originally was Revolution British Wrestling, RBW. They were doing a show in London, and I went along the following Saturday, and I had a look at their setup, and wow, I saw straight away they needed help, and I mean big help. If you think about it, think about this scenario. The ring was literally totally dark. They had just a curtain that the wrestlers were coming through without any lights or anything there. And then they had these two bright spotlights that were supposed to be in the ring, but were actually blinding the audience. And then when I saw what they were doing on the merchandise table, it was almost embarrassing. It's like, and I was thinking, these guys need a bit of help. So I was running Spectrum Multimedia at the time, and we had just started a very decent contract with Discovery Channel. We were doing a lot of what we call reversioning over there, which is getting programs that come in from America, like Miami Inc., for example, and that sort of stuff, and then editing them down into the correct lengths with commercial breaks and making sure everything's Ofcom compliant and all that sort of stuff. So that was a good contract, which generated a substantial amount of income over a couple of years. So basically, I thought, okay, let's see what we can do if I can help this. So I started helping RBW with an entranceway, first off, basic entranceway. And then I started adding a couple of little cameras, nothing major. And but with me, I'm never satisfied with just the way things look. I always like to take it to the next level the best I can.
I've experienced that, Ben.
Yeah, so I mean, before I knew what was happening, Spectrum Multimedia owned 6 shoulder cameras, and we had 2 live vision mix systems and entranceways and all that sort of stuff. And that was when we ended up doing a lot of other bits and pieces. But by that time, Real Quality Wrestling had come about. That was originally owned by Phil Powers.
Right.
And I met Phil through RBW. We were working there, and I helped him with a couple of bits and pieces. And we did the first RQW show was Clacton Carnage. I know. I think it was like October 2005, if I remember rightly, something like that. So we filmed that one and put it together and all that stuff. And one thing led to another, and we started working together. We put together a 20-foot ring together, and we started doing other bits and pieces. And eventually, RQW started doing a few other bits and pieces. Phil was one of the old school, I suppose, Carney-style wrestlers, because he wanted it more to be a case of American-style wrestling, or the poster to just say wrestling and without putting a brand on it and all that sort of stuff. But sort of having grown up more with the WWF side of things, I tried to brand it to a degree, and that's where the RQW stuff sort of started going out. One reason or another, Phil and I parted, and I just took on the whole RQW thing myself, pretty much. And from there, we started doing a couple of shows. The first one, in actual fact, was July down in Horndean in Hampshire. July 2006, that was. Let's see. I'm not sure if that was the first Summer Brawl. That might have been Summer Brawl, in fact. I'm trying to think of whether I had a name for that one or not. I think it was Summer Brawl. But basically, that's when we had Sewer on the card. And also we had, Dean Ayers was working with me on commentary at that time. So that match was Ricky Knight versus Sewer. We actually had a 9-man cruiserweight match. So there's elimination towards the cruiserweight titles and all that. So there was a lot of stuff going on. But, drawing the audience was the hard part. Horndean was always a hard area to draw the audience. Nice venue, but unfortunately the venue didn't work. But we gave it the big entranceway. We had a couple of cameras there. We filmed it properly and everything. And one thing led to another. And basically, after that, I decided if we're going to do this, let's do this thing properly. So that was when I started looking at doing York Hall, doing smaller venues. So the first show at York Hall was Rebirth, and that was November in 2006. And basically, again, drawing the audience was always the hard part. I wasn't a promoter. That was not my thing. I'm a production guy. I've always been a production guy. So basically, the way I did Rebirth was I wanted British wrestling to try and get a shot in the arm the best way it could. So I went to all of the promotions that I'd been working with, doing other bits and pieces, and I just said, look, if you want to put a match on Rebirth, all I will ask you to do is pay for your wrestlers. That's it. That's all I'm going to ask you to do. You can get the footage. You can do whatever you want with it. Just pay for your wrestlers. And we had some great talent down there. I mean, Pac was on the list. We had Martin Stone on the list. We had Drew Galloway or Drew McIntyre. So we had a lot of good people on that show. Not one of the promotions paid for their talent. So I ended up paying for them all. So that was the one thing. And at that time, that was when I thought, okay, so this obviously isn't going to work. So I ended up trying to be a promoter myself, but using people to promote the actual shows and put the posters out and do everything. And it never quite went the way I wanted it to, which was why we couldn't draw as many people as we wanted to. I realized that. Some people at the time said it was due to the fact that if they could see the shows so quickly on DVD or on TV, maybe they didn't need to be there in person, which was one thing. But the first Rebirth show was in December, we presented on TWC Fight. Yeah. So that was the first of the weekly shows, which we were putting out there. We did 72 episodes at the end of the day, so it was quite a consistent thing. So then come December, we did a Christmas one. I was working closely with Alex Shane at the time, and Alex was helping me out big time. He was sort of opening up proper doors and getting me into magazines and bits and pieces and doing whatever he wanted. And he came up with this idea of giving the tickets away for Christmas in return for people just bringing in tin food for the charities and all that sort of stuff. And I thought, okay, why not? I'm paying for everything anyway. And just so you know, the reason why I was paying for everything, the reason why I started RQW, some people didn't know the answer to this. They just wondered where it was all coming from. Because my Spectrum Multimedia did rather well income-wise, my accountant said to me one time that you realize you're going to have a fairly large tax bill this year. So I just said to him, how do I avoid having a rather large tax bill? And he said, well, the best way is usually to fund a startup company. So that's where Real Quality Wrestling came from. I used that tax money, which was a reasonable amount, to start that. That's why I wasn't overly worried about the expenditure at the start, because I envisaged I was building a brand, right? Yeah. That was the key. So anyway, I learned the lesson in December when even the charity, we gathered a lot of food for the charities, right? Not one of them that could even come be bothered to pick it up. Oh. So we had to sort of go out the way and drop it off to them and all that sort of stuff. And I was just thinking, okay, I don't mind helping charities, but there comes a limit. Yeah. When it's cost me several £1,000s to do it, So that was that. But then I'm just sort of rabbiting through here. I don't know whether you want to intervene with anything else.
No, this is great. You carry on, Len.
Well, basically,
go on. Sorry.
No, go on.
Well, I was first alerted to, made aware of RQW, Real Quality Wrestling, when 1PW folded and they brought over the great Muta. And RQW were able to have Muta for that show, and he went on with Martin Stone. And that's when I realized RQW was this company that had great production values and, licensed music. What are your memories of that show with the great Muta versus Martin Stone?
Well, it's funny because that was the next show we did after the December one. That was January 2007. Basically, so without rehashing everything that went on, we know full well the whole story about 1PW, of what was going on up there. But basically, British wrestling was getting a slap in the face because Muta was going online saying British wrestling companies can't be trusted and all that sort of stuff because he'd been screwed out of his trip to Europe. The truth of the matter was, I found out afterwards, he had promised his wife a holiday in Paris. Now, it was his European debut. And he thought, okay, great. They're going to pay for me to go over. I'll do the shows in the UK. We'll skip over to Paris for a few days. Happy wife, right? Of course, that didn't quite work out the way it was going to be. So basically, the 1PW show was meant to be on the Saturday. So Alex came up to me and he said, "Is there any way we can recover this? Would you like to get Muta on your show in your call on the Friday?" And there was a lot of Kikutaru was the agent who was responsible for all of this stuff with Alex. So they were going back and forth. And I just said to Alex, "Look, present something to me. If you guys can work it out, present something to me and we'll see what happens," right? So anyway, he came back. We worked out a price, which, being honest, wasn't as much as I thought it was going to be. So, but we did have to change flights because they were flying in on the Friday, ready for the show on Saturday. So we had to fly them into Heathrow, ready for the show on Friday. That was the difference. So we arranged the deal. So Kikutaro came in, and Nasawa came in. I'm trying to think who else was on the call. But anyway, there were a couple of others tied in with it. And a shed load of press came with him. Cameras and everything. There was literally around the ring, there was like loads of Japanese press everywhere. But we met him. I wanted to make sure that he understood that we wanted to make this right. So literally, we met him in a stretch limo at Heathrow. And we gave him and his wife a tour around London in the stretch limo. And then when we checked them into the hotel, I gave him his pay there and then while he checked into the hotel. So he knew full well there was nothing dodgy. He'd already been paid. Everything was fine. Same with Kikutaro. We agreed a percentage of the flight costs, and we agreed a per wrestler fee for their guys as well. And then, of course, I issued it out to all of the 1PW people. And I basically said, if you have bought a ticket for the 1PW show with Muta on it, if you want to present it at your call, you'll be allowed to come in to see the show. So I know some did, but basically, again, all I ever try and do is help. It's one of those things. Money is never my god. There's never been that sort of situation with me. And it worked out well. The show went well. The footage of Martin Stone versus Muta has been played and replayed in quite a few places. And the final shots of Martin with the green mist on his face were priceless. Yeah. But literally, yeah, Muta's entrance, that was phenomenal. But that weekend was a big weekend because we had my show on the Friday at York Hall. Then on the Saturday, we did the Will Not Die show at 1PW. So we actually went up there. I was working with the guys from 3CW, and they asked me if I'd help out, and we ended up filming that show as well. And then on the Sunday, we had Chick Fight 7. So it was quite a big thing. That was from Great Yarmouth, from the Marina Centre down there. So so it was quite a busy weekend of filming and footage and everything that was going on. But after that, shortly after that, this is where it took a turn. That was January the 12th, 13th, and 14th, if I remember rightly. 12th was our show, 13th was the 1PW, and 14th was Chick Fight, I do believe, in 2007. And then literally 3 weeks later, I get a phone call. I'm at the studio, and it was a guy from WWE, or at the time, were they still WWF in 2007? I can't remember. But anyway.
It would have been WWE at that time, yeah.
So basically, the whole thing with Muta had got the RQW name over in America. So basically, his word was they were looking to set up WWE Europe, and they wanted to come over and have a chat with me. So I met with, a couple of weeks later, I met with two of them, and we had a really good talk, really good meeting. And then for all of 2007, my name was tied up with possibly being the head of WWE Europe. And that was in the magazines and mentioned everywhere and everything. It never happened at the end, because what happened to that situation was Vince was going through another steroid scandal with Congress. Right. So at the time, he was planning on expanding into Europe, into China, and into Mexico. And he remembered how much the steroid scandal had cost him before. And this was shortly after the Benoit thing, if I remember correctly. How much it had cost him before. So he stopped all his expansions at that time and pulled everything back in. But at that time, I'd gone through I don't know, 3, 4, 5 months. I had the plan completely in place. I knew exactly how it was going to work out. I spent a small fortune preparing for it all, just in case. But, you know, never assuming that it was going to happen, but just making sure that when Vince did decide to pull the trigger, everything was in the right place. So, you know, it worked to a degree. But then, yeah, finally, when he pulled everything in, that all went away. But RQW, I kept doing shows for a while. And, you know, the audience attendance just wasn't working. I still needed TV footage and whatever. So in March 2008, I just said, I got to pull the plug on this. I can't keep funding it anymore. So that's where RQW, as a promotion, as it were, sort of fell apart.
Yeah, oh, that's a shame. So did the WWE, the potential WWE job as head of WWE Europe, did that transition into your position with TNA Wrestling?
In actual fact, no, it wasn't connected. Or at least, let's put it this way, I say it wasn't connected. But what happened was Alex Shane had been working a lot with TNA, and he'd been trying to get them to set up the British tour for the longest time. So basically, they came over in June 2008, first off, and we had 4 small shows, 2 of them up in the Liverpool Olympia, one of them in the Coventry, I say small, Coventry Skydome, and then there was one at a venue in Essex that I forget.
It was Brentwood. I was there.
Brentwood, there you go. And that was the one where Doug was announced as being part of the TNA roster. I do remember that. So basically, Alex asked me on that one if I would do the entranceways. So my video system was brought into play for all the entrance stuff. And if I would film the shows, which I did. They weren't filmed in HD because HD wasn't really still popular at that time, but they're in the TNA library. They were all taken back to the TNA offices. And at that time, here's a story for you. And I will say this, and there's one person who at the time, I don't know how old he was, it's 2008. I don't know, how old would Zach have been there? 16, 17, something like that.
Would have been, yeah.
Right. And basically, without him, the TNA shows wouldn't have gone on.
Right.
I can tell you that straight away. And the reason is very, very simple. TNA had shipped a 6-sided ring into London, and we had to have it driven up to Liverpool, to the Olympia. So there's this huge low loader with all of the crates for the 6-sided ring up there. And or at least Alex had been in touch with a lumber yard here there up in Liverpool to provide all of the lumber to the specifications that were needed. You'll have a fun story with this one, right?
Yeah.
So basically, the crew, Zach was there doing the ring. George, bless him, he was there doing the ring. Late George, if you remember George from WAW. I
don't know George.
No, but he was there doing it, and a gentleman by the name of Brian, and they were the ring crew. They had a 26-foot truck, right, 7.5 ton. They were doing the ring. So anyway, the wood arrived, and it's that thick, and it is literally not long enough to cover the ring at all. Right. So what we had to do, and this was down to Zach's expertise with the ring. I got to tell you, he has forgotten much more about wrestling rings than anybody outside of Bob Rosen knows about rings, right? And if you don't know Bob Rosen, you will shortly. But basically, he made it work. He made all the wood work. He made it sit into the middle. And bear in mind, we're talking a 6-sided ring here. So it's not your standard, straight lines. He made it work. And then we had people like Rhino, and all that sort of stuff. I'm thinking, this wood will never take it. So we actually had a look outside, and we found this huge piece of steel that was just lying around outside. So we brought it in and we put it under the wood in the middle, right? Mm. So at the end of the day, yes, the ring was ready, and it did the job. And there was one match, I forget who it was. I think it was Abyss and Rhino. I think it was those two. But that day was either Rhino was ready to body slam Abyss or the other way around. And we're all going, this ring is not going to take it. This ring is not going to take it. But it did. And it did it really, really well. So again, that first tour, by the time we did the Brentwood show, we already knew about the arena shows that were starting in January 2009. That had already been booked, right? But that ring not only did those shows, it did the 2009 shows as well with a little bit of tidying up. So, you know, Zach's work on that was spectacular. He did an amazing job. And I literally, you know, I've told this story so many times. Without him, those shows would not have happened for sure. He became the TNA blue-eyed boy, that's for sure, after that one.
That's an amazing story. I never knew that. I knew Zach was handy with rings, but that is incredible.
Yeah.
So I was, as I say, I was at the Brentwood show when they announced that TNA were going to do these arena shows like 6 months away. I was like, no way, no chance are they going to fit that many people at Wembley. And I went to Wembley, and sure enough, 8,000 people in there. I couldn't believe it. I was so chuffed. Being a TNA or Impact Wrestling diehard, I was thrilled for the company.
It was amazing. In fact, they called it the biggest house show in TNA history.
Oh, yeah. Must have been. I mean, I went to Wembley 3 times to watch TNA, and I got the privilege of seeing Kurt Angle versus AJ Styles, Doug Williams versus Ric Flair. You know, these matches I never dreamed of seeing live. It was awesome. Do you have any other interesting stories from those tours? Were you at the consequent tours?
Oh, yeah. I mean, basically what happened after the first tour in June, what they did, the sound reinforcement guy, a guy called Ian Livy from up in Birmingham, amazing company, amazing guy. And he's been doing all the TNA tours ever since. And it was always getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So obviously my entranceway and sound thing wasn't needed. There's no way I could provide anything for Glasgow or for Manchester or for Wembley. I mean, that was way beyond my capability. So basically, Ian took over all the sound and lighting for everything to do with that. And I ended up working with Zach and Ash on the rings. So basically we were the ring crew. That was our job from there. So I would be driving the truck, sorting all that out, sorting out the logistics of everything that came on board. And then when it came to the TNA tours themselves, the logistics suddenly increased because when they added Dublin to the list, it meant that we had to have a second ring because we had to have one that was traveling. Because the only way you get to Dublin is by driving up to Liverpool, taking an overnight 8-hour ferry into Dublin itself, and then you're there for the following day. So there's no way you can do it tight. You know, you have to plan everything, and 9 times out of 10, the Dublin show would happen either somewhere in the middle of the tour or somewhere towards the end of the tour. So you always had to have 2 sets of ring crews working everything through. Now, at this point, this is where I'm going to bring in Bob Rosen, because if you don't know Bob Rosen, when you watch the old TNA shows, Bob was the big security guy with the mustache and the little beard.
Yes, I know who you mean.
Right. Now, Bob, they call him the ringmaster simply because he is the boss when it comes to everything to do with rings. He can tell you exactly how much weight one corner of the ring will take after he's built it, right? Literally, because some venues require that. They require all of the diagrams of how much weight they can put on this thing to make it work. So anyway, I was introduced to Bob, and we started working together on the various TNA ring designs because they sent across a second ring, which we had to build up and get it ring ready. So that meant that we had to have a crew to do the Dublin run and a crew to drive around the rings in the UK. So that was interesting. And then in 2009, in September, we then did Europe. So we went over into Germany. So it's the same sort of deal. It was very, very weird. In actual fact, I've got a story for the European one, which you'll find interesting, but I'll get to that in a moment. So we ended up with 2 6-sided rings here, both of which were stored in I mean, originally we were storing them up in Norwich. Yeah, the first one. And then I think the second one got stored up there as well after a while because we were putting it together down here in Essex. And then I think they both got put together, if I remember rightly. Brain clicking into play here. There's a lot of factors going on because there's a lot of things which merge together. But so basically, we ended up having 2 rings working. The September one in Germany, that was only the 1 ring in place, but we had a big. Let me get this right. I think I'm going out of date here on the sequence. Yeah, we definitely did Europe in 2009, but that was just the 1 ring. And then it's 2010 when we started getting more interactivity going on, where we needed 2 rings. So yes, I remember that. And then of course came the 2010 was when they did the what did they used to call it with the X at the top?
Ultimate X.
Yeah, Ultimate X, that's it. The Ultimate X was the first time they actually did that in the UK.
Yeah.
And setting that up was a major task in its own right, as you can imagine. And of course, we had to make sure, because it was being done very quickly, we had to make sure the disassembly was a lot quicker than it was to put it up. So in that situation, yeah, that was quite an amazing match to watch. And I will never forget Suicide taking a nasty drop to the ring, and afterwards he was rather bruised. Let's just say he couldn't walk very well after that one. I know he did take a nasty drop from the middle right down into the ring itself. So that was quite a nasty one. But then
Frankie Kazarian was playing Suicide.
Yeah, Kazarian was, in actual fact, at that point, Kazarian was brilliant.
Oh yeah,
Suicide, absolutely. We had a little game going on. He would always say, so he said, you just tell me afterwards how many times I tried to kill myself, how many different ways I tried to kill myself. So it was a case of drinking poison, I shot myself, I hung myself. So we have a little game afterwards. Kazarian's a good guy. I get on really, really well with him. He was such a good guy. And as a matter of fact, I got to say, all of the TNA crew were so friendly and professional. It was really, really cool. It was one of those experiences that you just never forget. I miss them. I really do miss them. A lot of them are dear friends now. But in 2010, I think it was, 2011 is when they changed the ring to the 4-sided ring.
Yeah.
So I had the task of converting those 2 6-sided rings into 2 4-sided rings. And we did that in Dagenham. There was a metal works right across from where our Spectrum Multimedia offices were. And they did the conversion for us, and they did a great job. They really did a great job. I was working with Jack Saunders at the time. He was helping us out big time with that. And watching these guys in action, and again, this is Bob. This is how effective Bob Rosen is. He sent me a couple of little diagrams, and he said, this is what you have to do to convert it to a 4-sided ring. All right, so we're following this thing. And the rope length, and just so people know, let's get this right. We're not talking rope here. All right. You're talking elevator cable inside hose pipe, and then with a little bit of tape wrapped around it, and that's it. Right. The length, we were expecting all sorts of things, but the length of the 6-sided ring actually matched when we made it into a 4-sided. That was crazy.
Right.
That was really, really interesting, because if you think about it, the average ring's length was 18 feet. Right, on a 4-sided, but when you look at the 6-sided, the longest part was like 25 feet. So I was just thinking, how does that work? It's like it was, but the maths worked out. They worked out really, really well. And so we got these 2 4-sided rings, and we had the first use of that 4-sided ring, and Kazarian's going to come into this in a moment, was down in Lyon in France. So we had Bob Rosen with us. He flew over a couple of days before, just checked the rings, make sure they were good. And then me, Jack, and Bob, we hit the road. And after 21 hours of solid driving, we ended up down in Lyon in south France. And this was the tour that Ric Flair was on as well. And D'Lo was doing all the head of talent stuff at the time. So he was doing really, really well with all of that. The moment Jack came in and he saw how tall Jack was, he said, I want to test you out. So, of course, they were doing these test outs at the shows. They would get
they called them gut checks.
Gut checks, that's it. And so he got Jack in on a gut check as well, which I thought was really very, very cool. But that first show in Lyon, something really, really weird happened. Everything was set up. Everything was good to go. And all of a sudden, we noticed that the middle rope didn't seem to be as tense as it should have been. Now, what had happened was apparently one of the screws had stripped or something, because these were held together with, real screws and clamps and all sorts of stuff. And the first match coming out was Kazarian versus Chris. There's me. I got a blank going on.
Chris Sabin, Christopher Daniel.
That was it, Chris Sabin. So yeah, so Kazarian versus Chris Sabin, right? And we were all thinking, oh my God! And the rope suddenly gives way, right? The middle rope is gone. It's the first match of the night,
right?
Not being taped or anything. It was just literally a house show. But literally, what Sabin did, I'll never forget this. He literally just grabbed hold of the rope, threw it to the outside of the ring, and just said to Kazarian, "Come on." Those two held a middle of the ring match in sheer perfection. They never touched the ropes once. So that was just sheer masterclass in wrestling, those two. And then afterwards, this goes to show how good JB is the fact that we said to JB, just keep them talking, we'll fix the rope between matches, right? So literally, Bob, Jack, and myself, we sort of jumped up, got the rope back in place, got it all up, and then the next one was a girls' match. So by the time the girls came out, JB kept them talking, the ring was back in. Within about 3 or 4 minutes, that rope was back up, and JB was doing all his usual crowd wind-up stuff that he does, absolutely magnificently. And that was never talked about again. I never heard that mentioned in any of the press or in anything. But the next show after that was Paris, and in order to get there in time, I had to leave Lyon the moment the show was over. We loaded the truck, and I drove through the night to get to Paris, to get that in time. So, and then afterwards into Germany and a few other bits and pieces, but great tour. I mean, I just love touring with TNA. And that was my last one, 2011, because in February 9th, I flew over to LA. And after that, for the next few years, I was still coordinating the ring for TNA in the UK. So I was still setting everything up for that. And then I became their ring supervisor over here for California. But what we did, and I know I'm rambling away here, left, right, and center. I just realized that. In 2012, Bob Rosen called me again and said, we have a ring which is stored in Torrance here in California. Can you pick that up and convert that to a four-sided ring? So I found a fabricator here who literally had just enough room to fit the four-sided ring inside, right? And so his name's Pablo, bless him. He's really good at what he does. And his steps are so good when he makes the aluminium steps, right? His steps are so good that Bob contacted me at the first AEW show and said, get a set of steps made with Pablo and bring it out to us in Vegas. So there's the same fabricator, like 3-4 years later, whatever it was. Anyway, so that ring, that four-sided ring ended up being used in Phoenix in Bound for Glory 2012.
Yeah.
And then that same ring got used in San Diego in Bound for Glory in 2013. And then Bob had to be somewhere else. So with my guy, Jonathan, we took it up to Salt Lake City in Utah to do a couple of Impact tapings. And then it came back and it's got in storage. And then the only other time it got used was 2013 November when Kurt Angle went in the ring with One Direction. I don't know whether you remember that.
No, I don't remember that.
Well, there was a thing called One Direction Day, and it was on exactly the same day as Doctor Who's 50th birthday, right? 50th anniversary. And we were ordered to collect the ring and take it down to the YouTube studios here in LA. And One Direction were there, and they were one of them had said he wanted to go into the ring with Kurt Angle. So literally, we set the ring up outside, and they worked this whole thing through. It was One Direction Day, an MTV thing, and that whole thing was all One Direction. And the one member of One Direction wearing a mask, all right, did this whole thing where he did a match with Kurt Angle, and you know the score. And one thing led to another, and that was quite a major promotional day for TNA as well, down on One Direction Day in MTV. So it was quite fun.
That's fantastic. I'm going to have to search for that on YouTube.
Well, just so you know, the ring that's being used at the Epic tapings was one of the converted 6-sided to 4-sided TNA rings.
Yes, I was aware of that. They're still using that in the WAW Performance Center now.
Right.
It's a wonderful ring to work in, but like you say, the ropes, the cables wrapped in hose pipe, they're so stiff. Oh my God, I hate them.
Out. When we were putting together the second six-sided ring, we had Phil Powers helping us out, right? So once we got the cables up and taut, he ran the ropes, and literally he said, "Oh my God, that's like hitting a brick wall."
Yeah. No exaggeration.
And the fun thing is, when we were working with the six-sided ring, the TNA, we had a standard formula that we had to do. When, for example, Team 3D came out, we had to slacken the cables off a little bit to make it easier for them.
Mm.
When AJ was coming out, we had to make it rock hard.
Yeah.
You know, so you would always notice we were always looking like we're checking the ring, but we're tightening and loosening at the same time. So there's a little bit of playing going on there.
That's awesome. Again, I'm very conscious of the fact we've gone 45 minutes. Did you have anything else you needed to do today?
No, I'm good. I mean, keep it going.
I could chat to you for another hour, honestly. This has been fantastic. The big thing I wanted to talk to you about, just sort of going off on a tangent from TNA, a really fascinating conversation I had with you backstage at Epic Studios was about your involvement with the music for the ECW DVDs that were released in the UK. This is how much of a mark I am. I was collecting those DVDs when, for people who don't know, in the UK, the ECW shows were released on DVD, but unlike the US, the music had to be dubbed over because of licensing rights, and I'm sure everyone's aware of how that all works. But Len, you produced the music for these DVDs, and it's just some of them are so memorable to me, especially like New Jack's theme tune that had to be dubbed over the entire match because it was New Jack.
Right.
So what was your involvement with the ECW DVDs and Delta Music?
Well, Delta Music at the time, my connection with Delta goes back to 2002. In the fact that I became aware of a gentleman called Charles Webster, who was our big contact. And he was my main man at Delta, bless him. And we ended up, I don't know, it must have been about 600 or 700 DVDs that I authored for Delta over the years. And I mean, and these are all sorts of DVDs. It's like, you get somebody, they would go out to a classic car show, and they'd be filming a classic car show, and the next thing you know, it's a Delta release. Yeah. You know, and there's all sorts of stuff like that, and that's what they were doing a lot of. And then all of a sudden, the ECW thing, because Charles is a huge wrestling mark like us, right? So they had a license from ECW. I think the company was Power Sports Power Dogs, if I remember rightly. They were the ones who had the license for the ECW stuff. And Delta did a license with them to release them over here. The problem is, of course, as we know, ECW, if they wanted to use the Eagles as an entrance theme, they would use the Eagles as an entrance theme. They wouldn't worry about it, right? But obviously, we couldn't do that for the physical copyrights because there would be a lot of money. And I'll come back to that in a moment. But basically, what I had to do was edit those shows down, replace them with copyright-free music or music which has no major copyright attached to it. And the music we used for ECW, you've probably heard later on because I was using it for Destiny. For the longest
right, yeah.
The ECW opening theme was a standard piece of copyright music. I used it for Destiny's entrance as well at Upbringing. So it's just a good piece of track. That dun, dun, dun. It's just a good feel to it, you know.
Yeah.
But that was the reason. So literally, we authored all of the DVDs. And what I would do is they would originally come in what we call an old digibeater. So as a matter of fact, says he reaching down. This is an old digibeater tape. This is one of the old RQW tapes.
All right.
And this is digital Betacam. It's a broadcast format.
Look at the size of it.
Yeah, it's only standard definition. This is a 2-hour tape, right?
Right.
If you can imagine, I've got shed loads of these on the shelf down here. But the ECW stuff would come shipped over on these, right? And they were American, which meant they were the original NTSC formats. So the first thing I had to do was get them transferred into PAL, which was the British format. And the big difference is that NTSC, for the old going on a broadcast line, in our old TVs, you know, we had 625 lines on the TV. That's what it meant. It meant that in the old big cathode ray tubes, there would be 625 actual lines of image, and that's what's happening. That's how your picture is being created. On the NTSC version, it's only 525 lines. So basically, what would happen is anything that you tried to show PAL in the US would only ever come up black and white, because they couldn't get all the lines information, and you had to get it converted and all that sort of stuff. So that was a pain in the butt. But eventually, we ended up doing all of the conversions here. And then those got captured into my video system in real time. And then I had to go through and edit the music out. And literally, and sometimes it could be as simple as just when somebody's coming in, they may not have a music piece to play. So I would just have standard crowds going, yay, as they were sort of fitting in.
EC dub. EC dub.
Exactly. So there was a lot of, I would pick together a lot of sound effects, and the EC dub chant was naturally one that got used a lot.
Yeah.
But if I remember rightly, we did there's about 7 or 8 titles, I think, of those ECWs when they were out there, something like that, I do believe. And yeah, I mean, I don't know beyond that where to go. But when it comes to the music with Delta Music, here's the interesting story. You know that Vince bought the ECW catalog. Yeah. Right. The moment he did that, his legal people apparently, so Charles told me, sent a letter out to cease and desist issuing ECW titles to Delta Music.
Right.
Delta Music showed the contract that they had for the license, and they said, if you know, this had a while to go, if you want us to cease and desist, buddy, it's going to cost you. Right. So what I can say is, apparently the cost you generated enough money for Delta that the major project that I did for Delta was Lovejoy, the DVD release of Lovejoy series. Yeah. Now, in Lovejoy, season 1 in particular, which came out in '85, and those of you not familiar, Lovejoy was Ian McShane. Brilliant show, absolutely brilliant, based in Norwich or in Norfolk. Yeah. And it's all about what do you call a diviner, somebody who can tell an antique by its genuine feel. So anyway, season 1, because it was done in '85, featured all the music you could think of, you know, like The Power of Love and Sting and Tears for Fears and ABBA and all sorts of stuff. So, of course, they wanted £28,000 to clear the music for season 1 of Lovejoy. So basically, Charles came to me and said, what can we do? So I had masters of Lovejoy, and those first Delta Music masters, all of the music in Lovejoy is me. So basically, we come to an agreement which you know, it sort of saved them a lot of that £28,000. But the season 1 of Lovejoy and a few of the others afterwards, because after season 2 they sort of became a bit more wise. Yeah, so I'm very pleased to say that I've actually got music in the Lovejoy soundtrack.
So you had to produce music that was sounded like.
It's not sounded like so much. A lot of it. I mean, because of some of the stuff I did, my album I did in '92 at the end of the day. So some of the stuff that I did had a sort of 80s feel to it anyway. So it's like the opening track is as he's driving. I don't know if you've ever seen Lovejoy, but the opening scene, he's driving in his crappy old Volvo down a lane in Norfolk, and you've got BBC Radio Norfolk playing, right? And he's playing The Power of Love by Huey Lewis and the News, right? So I changed that. I became the voice of BBC Radio Norfolk, and the song became The Loving Kind, which is off my album.
Right.
So it's got that sort of 80s feel, but by the time you blend it all in together, it sounds like a natural soundtrack. Yeah. And obviously, we didn't have the individual tracks to work with, so I was playing with a lot of stuff where I had to make the music, like when they're in a pub and they're having a conversation, the music's playing in the jukebox. I had to make the music I was putting over the top slightly louder, so it's masking what's there, but you can tell there's some music playing. You just can't necessarily work out what it is. So there were a lot of tricks done, but that was several months of a great project that I really enjoyed. And again, that was indirectly thanks to ECW and Vince.
Yeah, it's amazing. The stuff, you know, these things have a way of working out, don't they?
They do indeed.
It's mad. I've got so many more things I want to talk to you about, Len, but we've gone 56 minutes. So I if it's okay with you, shall we do a part 2 at some point?
Whatever works for you. I'm totally up for it.
Fantastic. Len, you've been beyond fascinating. I'm really excited for our audience to listen to this or watch this and appreciate your stories, because it's been absolutely brilliant, and I cannot thank you enough, sir.
My pleasure, Peter, dear boy. And I mean, again, there's a load to talk about. Particularly next time, ask me about TNA and Zurich.
In Zurich. Okay, I'm going to write that down.
Yeah, because TNA and Zurich is a fascinating story.
All right. Fantastic. Again, Len, where can people find you on social media?
The easiest one for me is my website, lendavies.com, basically. So they can contact me through there. They can reach whatever. And I will give a little plug.
Yes, please do.
Because this is what we're working on right now. I'm working as president of Tesla Comics.
Right.
Which is quite an unbelievable project. I've got to be fair. I'm working with a gentleman called Will Cashin from the Tesla Foundation. And when we say Tesla, we're not talking about Elon Musk Tesla cars. We're talking about the gentleman, Nikola Tesla.
Yeah.
Actual person himself. And basically, so many people just don't know that Nikola was a true life superhero. He was born in 1856, died in 1943, and he wanted us all to have free electricity and free gadgets and everything. But unfortunately, brilliant inventor, but not much of a businessman, sadly. But a lot of the things that we do today, even our phones and everything and Wi-Fi's and everything, were originally created by Nikola Tesla way back in the 1900s, and people just don't know it. So we're pushing it. Tesla Comics is our latest thing. We got a lot of other bits and pieces. There's animations on the cards and all sorts. So teslacomics.com, and then you can learn a bit more about what we're doing.
Fantastic. I know you're a big Marvel DC enthusiast. So
can I show you something?
Yes, please do.
I dressed up for this, but I'm Batman underneath.
I didn't expect anything else, Len. That's tremendous. Len, thank you so much for your time today, and I look forward to be able to do part 2 with you.
Can't wait. Everybody stay safe out there. It's a crazy world right now, but we'll get through this.
Wonderful. For Len Davies, I'm Peter Nixon. This has been TBN Chats number 3. Thank you very much for watching / listening.